Hello, my name is Darren Wright, and I am going to present my video vlog on a book that I read called Until I'm Free. It's a story of Fannie Lou Harmer, um, and it was written by Keisha N. Blaine. And this book was an incredible read. One thing I wanted to start off with is normally when you read a book and its introduction, sometimes the author's message is not the clearest. Um, Sometimes when you are reading a book, you're kind of trying to figure out what the author is trying to convey or what message they want you to receive. In this book, um, Dr. Keisha Blaine was very clear on her message of what she was trying to do with her book, what message she wanted you to receive. In her introduction, it kind of starts off with an introduction of how Fannie Lou Harmer grew up, basically just a short synopsis of her life. Um, the reason why she was inspired to write this book was in college, her senior year at Binghamton. She was inspired by some of the speeches and some of the assignments that she had, which kind of lit a fire under her when it came to the civil rights movement, when it came to just human rights, and how powerful Fannie Lou Hammer's life was. Um, One thing about Fannie Lou Hammer that stood out was is that she had very little education. She stopped her education probably around the sixth grade, but even though she had very minimum education, that didn't stop her from being one of the greatest orators of speech when it came to the civil rights movement and women's rights. Um, Her point of view was very, as one chapter is titled "Tell It Like It Is." It's very straight to the point. She didn't really sugarcoat what she talked about. One thing that Blaine did put in her introduction is how she was inspired by Hammer's meager beginnings. She herself had came up, not with upper class or the best means, but looking at Fannie Miss Hammer's life, you would see that that didn't deter her from becoming who she became. And also, she Blaine had talked about how she kind of felt some insecurity of how would she be able to convey a message when you see other people maybe coming from different walks of life, maybe better education, Ivy League, and certain things of that nature. The inspiration that Fannie gives, that Miss Hammer gives, from her meager beginnings, but able to have such a big impact in the world, just shows that that doesn't matter. Um, and I think that can be an inspiration for all of us, especially for those that are in history, history majors, or have graduated, and you think to yourself, how can I make a difference with what I write or with what I say? Um, but as you can see from this book, it kind of shows how that doesn't matter. Really, it's you putting in the work and the fight to want to better yourself and the people around you. So that's pretty much where the introduction leads off at. And one thing that is a constant uh, theme in this book, every chapter normally, I believe there's six chapters in this book, and a conclusion, an introduction and a conclusion. But every chapter begins with something, an example of something in present day or modern day that she uses to basically correlate with Miss Hammer's life. Um, for an example, she used the Sandra Bland situation to show about the effects of state violence, meaning violence that comes from the police or an authority. Sandra Bland, she was arrested over a simple traffic violation, and later she ended up found in her cell hung, and no charges were brought up. And, she correlates that with the situations that happen in Mississippi and the South, and for a lot of black people that might have been attacked by the police. And in the book, it talks about how Miss Hammer was attacked by police, and that they beat her, they took her to jail. The prisoners, with the assistance of the prisoners, they beat her. She said, she quoted, until her body turned hard. She had kidney damage, permanent kidney damage from the beating. um, and it just shows how back then it was nothing for the police to inflict harm upon you and not be held accountable. And we've come a long way, but we're still under a system to where police can do certain things and get away with it. And the Sandra Bland situation was an example of that. So. Dr. Blaine's examples of how she can take something that happens in modern day and infuse it with what was going on back then, and shows the situation or the things that Miss Hammer had to go through, um, how she was harassed, and it's just she feared for her life, but she didn't fear dying for what she believed in, and she did. She was able to convey that in her book. She also talks about, or she also writes about um, women's rights, and what she does is she gives a perfect example of how bad it was, especially in the South, especially in Mississippi, for black women, where she talks about how Miss Hammer's uterus was removed without her consent. And the only way that she found this out was basically through rumors on the plantation, or the farm that she was at, where they were talking about it, gossiping about it. And that's how she found out that she had been sterilized. And for a woman, that's one of the worst things that you can do to a woman, to sterilize her. But not only that, it was uh, without her consent. It was just done, I'm sure, out of malice, maybe who knows what was going on back then, as far as maybe trying to keep the population down, who knows. But at that time, it was common practice for doctors to sterilize black women without giving them a reason. When she confronted the doctor, when Miss Hammer confronted the doctor, he didn't have anything to say, basically. And she knew that if she brought him to court, that she would end up probably losing her life. Um, and to go back further into state violence, I'll go back into that. One of the gentlemen that was there, I believe, in some instance, was Emmett Till's killer's brother. So it just kind of shows you how all this was connected with violence against black people at that time. That it was just it was just a collusion. It was the state, the people of Mississippi, the people in these rural southern towns. They all stuck together, and they wouldn't dare convict anybody for killing or hurting anybody black. It just wasn't. It wasn't even on people's minds. They didn't. they looked at black people, when slavery, they looked at black people as property, and it still carried over as, field workers and sharecroppers. Um, Miss Blaine, or Dr. Blaine, did detail of how Miss Hammer grew up. She was the youngest of 20. They were very poor. The common theme that she wanted to convey to me in this book is of how hard Miss Hammer had it all the way through her life. This wasn't a story of um, rags to riches, or once she became maybe famous for civil rights, she was able to parlay that into some type of lucrative book deal, or some type of situation to where she would make more money. She was pretty much poor all of her life, even up until the end, which we'll get into a little later, where she talks about how they had to donate money. A lot of the activists and the community would donate money to help pay for her bills, what she was suffering from type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. Um, so, also going into another theme is politics. And Miss Hammer wasn't deterred. She actually ran for office, and running for office back then, especially in Mississippi, I mean that was unheard of. In the beginning, it talks about how Miss Hammer didn't even know that she had the right to vote until the SNCC, I believe is the name of the organization, came and had a meeting, and she learned there, and that's where she got her passion for the civil rights movement. But she ran knowing that she probably would lose. But I believe in her words, she said, she ran to show that a black person, especially a black woman, could run for office, that she could do it. And so Dr. Blaine correlates that with Kamala Harris, and how she, became the vice president of the United States, and showing how far we've come, where a black woman was able to run and successfully become the second most powerful figure in the nation, politically. And she goes on. One of the quotes that I thought was pretty moving, and it kind of shows Miss Hammer's style of speech. She said, "You can pray until you faint, but if you don't get up and try something, God is not going to put it in your lap." And it kind of goes back to that faith without works is dead. But she was very spiritual. She believed in God. That was her basis of her beliefs. But she was not to the point where she thought that you just prayed and somehow God was going to make a way. She did believe in putting action with her faith. One interesting thing to me, as much as she went through, she was born, raised, and died in Mississippi. She didn't move. And for most people going through what Miss Hammer went through, you would think once she was able to become famous in the civil rights movement, she would have moved to Chicago or Detroit or somewhere else. That was a little softer when it came to the civil rights movement, even though they had their issues. It was nothing like Mississippi at that time. One thing, and I'm going to end it with this. The way Dr. Blaine also explained the end, or the end and towards the death of Miss Hammer, it shows that this wasn't a fairy tale ending. She had breast cancer, and she suffered from that. I guess it reoccurred twice, and she ended up having to have a mastectomy, which an activist or a friend of hers helped pay for the prosthetic that they gave her. She also suffered from type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, and she was more concerned about others than herself, and it affected her health. One thing that Dr. Blaine writes in her book is that Miss Hammer was also depressed towards the end, and you don't when you think of people's lives that are in public figures, and I was kind of taken back that she was depressed like that towards the end. The bills had mounted up on her. She didn't wasn't making the money. Her husband wasn't making any money enough to pay the bills, which that's also another interesting dynamic that she kind of talks about is just her home life as far as between her and her husband. She was married previously, but she ended up marrying a man named Pap, and they were married. I think 31 years or somewhere in that realm. And she always made sure to give him the respect as the head of the house. So that also goes into her spirituality. Um, but even towards the end, it was sad because her grandkids, her granddaughters were helping was helping her husband pick cotton, and for me, it's like she was fighting for poverty and civil rights for black people, and to see that her grandchildren were still picking cotton in 1970s or the early 1970s, to me was a telling tale that things had not changed as much as we would want it to, at least in her time frame. Even in our time frame, it's still we still have a long way to go. But this book it didn't shy away from it. It didn't really shield you from the issues and troubles that she had. Uh, but it is an inspiring book because you can tell by reading a lot of the quotes that you can tell that she was a good speaker, but she also her education was not. She never graduated from high school, so it's simplistic. Her speeches were powerful yet simplistic for everybody to understand it, and I feel like the book kind of followed in the same narration as Fanny's speech. This book was very easy to read. It was very easy to go through it, and it was straight um, and straightforward, kind of telling you like it is. It didn't really sugarcoat anything. It didn't go outside the box. It was very right on point, and it gave you the information that you needed, and it wrapped it together with what was going on back then as well as what's going on right now. So I believe it's an excellent book. I would definitely recommend it to a lot of girls that are coming up. This should, to me, uh, be one of those required readings in high school, um, because it's just that powerful. So thank you, and this is my vlog, and have a great day.